All righty. So folks, this afternoon I have with me Doug Flack, who is head of the Flack Family Farm in Franklin County. And thank you very much, Doug, for talking to me today.
Yes, you're welcome. We're in Fairfield in Franklin County, the town of Fairfield.
Great. Okay. Good to know. Good to know. And just want to make sure that it's clear to everyone too that Doug has been kind enough to chat with me about farming and his farm and his view of farming, but he is not endorsing any candidates. So this does not constitute an endorsement. So Doug, could we start off maybe telling folks about how you came to have this farm? I guess it's called a family farm. Does that mean it's been in your family for generations?
I founded it in the late 70s when I settled here and built it up bit by bit over the decades since then. And we're an organic farm that raises a diversity of things. We have, well, for 18 years, we milked American milking Devon cattle and sold raw milk only. We didn't ship milk. And we still have these cattle. We don't have time to milk them right now, but we're going to go back to it sometime in the future because we love that. And we have a flock of sheep because we sell both meats from sheep and lamb, and from sheep and cattle. Very high quality, grass-fed, no grain, only grass-fed meat, and they feature a high degree of fat, and that's very important and unusual. But our main source of income is fermented vegetables, and last year we produced about 22 tons of sauerkraut and 2 kinds of kimchi, and we've been doing that for 20 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are, we also grow some medicinal plants and sell a small amount of that. And then we grow, our own, we don't sell vegetables to the public, but we grow all the vegetables for fermentation. So we grow all the cabbage, carrots, garlic, garlic, etc. Carrots, onions, yeah. So that's basically what our farm is, and we're in a transition. I'm 78, and so we have a young couple that were interns here 17 years ago, I think, that have been with us for 4 years now, and they're going to take over the farm. In fact, they're mostly running it right now.
Well, that's nice that you were able to find somebody.
What's that?
That's nice that you were able to find people who share your vision and were able to take over.
We think it's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I have one daughter, Sarah, who lives on the south end of the farm, and she helps out on the farm, but she has her own farm consulting business and specializes in various issues with farming, grazing. She's written a book called The Art and Science of Grazing by Sarah Flack. And she started on grazing when she was a little kid because we've been doing it for decades. It's called intensive grazing, and the animals are given fresh grass every few days, sometimes every day. And yeah, so the focus of the farm is on soils and soil function and soil fertility, because the crops are strongly affected in their nutritional quality by the quality of the soil. And so we've worked very hard at that, and focusing on issues that are good for human nutrition, the ecology of our area, and the whole planet. Climate change is a big issue. And yeah, so
Yeah.
that's the quickest summary I can give you.
Oh, that's awesome. That's fascinating. So you've really been very thoughtful about your approach, then haven't you? You're sort of a scholar as well as a farmer.
Well, learning by doing and over a long time. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And then what kinds of things do you have to do to the soil then to make it?
Well, the number one thing in caring for the soil is to use intensive grazing management. And we've built the percentage of carbon compounds in the soil, sometimes called humus, but much more complicated than that. From when I came here, it was about 2%, and now it's 9 to 11%. And that means our soil can absorb an enormous amount of carbon and sequester it, and rainfall. So when we get torrential rains, we don't have any erosion problems. And the water runs into the streams clear. And this is a good sign of when we're growing the crops, we use soil tests too, and large amounts of compost from the winter care of the sheep and the cattle.
Okay.
And we grow the cabbage through a dense layer of shredded hay, so that we protect the soil. We try not to keep soil bare, except for very short times if we have to cultivate. And that's important. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And do you get the opportunity to share your practices with other farmers in Vermont? Is there any forum for discussion of some of these practices?
Well, I've let me think how to answer that. It's a good question. I've been active in the organization called Rural Vermont.
Yep.
And we advocate for, economic justice for farms. And that's something maybe we can talk about. And, but I belong to NOFA, which is the organic farmers. And I've been also a chapter leader for the Weston A. Price Foundation, which is based on the work of Weston A. Price, and it's about human nutrition and human health. And that's a big focus of why we farm, because human health depends, number one, on what you eat and what your mother ate and what your grandmother ate and grandfather. And that's poorly recognized in our society, which is suffering a huge amount from degenerative diseases that don't need to be there. And now it's gotten very complicated because we have multi-generations of people who suffer nutritional deficiencies of many kinds. So that's so I've been a public lecturer on that subject, and sometimes on my farming methods, but not generally a lot.
I see. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I used to live overseas in the developing country of Bangladesh, and traveled
Yes.
quite a bit in Asia. And I mean, I saw firsthand what you're talking about in terms of generations of poor nutrition and how
Yeah.
that affected people's health adversely. It was quite, it's really right in your face when you can see multiple generations and so many millions of people affected so badly.
Well, I see that here.
Yeah, yeah.
I see that everywhere I go here. Yeah.
Yeah. You're more attuned to it, I would imagine, too.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
I looked at, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to ask you about the economic justice for farms. What would you like to say about that? More about that?
Well, it's very hard to make a living farming.
Mm-hmm.
We have an extremely popular bunch of products, but finding a price that will actually pay for a good life is almost impossible, because we're embedded in a cheap food world. And that's been created by policy. But we're also embedded in a world in Vermont of sometimes unfair regulation. For example, I believe, and rural Vermont believes, that the regulation for milk sales is entirely backwards, and mostly has to do with the powerful milk, commercial milk lobbies. And they make it hard for farmers to make a living selling raw milk. And raw milk is far superior to pasteurization. There's no comparison. They're not even the same product. They're not. And so cheap food policy also affects our livestock sales, because people are kind of shocked at how much work there is involved in producing meats or fermented vegetables. I think if the average person that buys our ferments realized how little we make and how hard we work, the system might change. But we have a policy in this country that originated soon after World War II, where the economy is focused on consumerism and away from food. And the food corporations have all the media power, and they have for almost my whole life. When I was a little boy, I know my parents were spending in excess of 20% of their income on food, and the food was much better since I was born in World War II. And now I think the average is something like 9%. And people are spending their money on stuff. And so we're at rural Vermont, we're trying to invert that picture so that, and the reason that we have so few farmers anymore, and we've lost so many millions of farmers, is because of this get big or get out and make cheap food policy, which dates way back and is enforced by our economics. and regulations. Yeah.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. Yeah, no, I grew up in a farming area, not in Vermont, but in Georgia, in the southern part of the state of Georgia.
Yeah.
And yeah, I
That's
know.
what, yeah, go ahead.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, this whole commercialization of farms and this big produce more, and yeah,
Yeah.
I know what you mean. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, thank you. You've really educated me, and I'm sure all the people who watch this, and would love to talk with you more about it, especially if I get back to Montpelier and see if we can't make some changes to improve.
Yeah. It's hard work. And working in the legislature is something that rural Vermont does a lot of, and I've participated. And I can tell you, for me, it's extremely frustrating. Like testifying to a committee, you get a couple of minutes and you can't really expand and try to educate people. And so moving policy is really difficult. And I was particularly active trying to make it easier and to sell raw milk and sell other products directly off the farm. So to our community, we should have the freedom to, instead of imposed power over our ability to sell high quality products to the public. And I'll give you an example. The regulations on raw milk, I found impossible. And a few farmers follow it, but I know many farmers that just quietly sell raw milk the way they did up until the 90s. Virtually all the small dairies sold to their neighbors, and that became an issue and then illegal. And so we had to turn that around, but only through a lot of regulation. And why the ag department always presents the negative story about milk being dangerous if it's not pasteurized is wrong, but that's what they always do in these committees. And so we would hit a wall all the time. And your fellow legislators would hear that negativity and that danger, and it's completely false. And similarly, we have to have our animals slaughtered in the slaughterhouse and be inspected, etc. When we could perfectly easily do a good job right here on the farm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially, we're not selling into supermarkets. We're selling in, and we want face-to-face business. Can you imagine us selling a dangerous product in a face-to-face? There's no future in that.
No. They know where to find you.
Yeah. So farmers can take the responsibility and not have it imposed on them. You see what I mean?
I do. Yep, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Anyway, I probably said enough.
Well, thank you. I have learned a lot. I mean that, and yeah, let's continue our discussions moving forward.
I looked at your website, and I was impressed by your background and by what you do. And that's why I've agreed to this interview. And so I wish you very well. And maybe, maybe our farm in some way will encounter you.
Yes. Yeah. No, I hope so, for sure. Yep.
Okay.
All righty. Thank you so much, then.
So you've asked all your